ViewComponent is a library or a gem that is developed by GitHub. And also Lookbook came after to present or put a presentation level on ViewComponent. So you can preview your components and also have a better user experience and user interface by having all those components. Andy gave you a bit of background from me. I'm Amir Ali Ashraf. People know me Parham, so it's the same stance inherited. And I'm Master of Computer Science, Senior Developer at Playground. I know Ruby, Python, Java, C#, Rust. And also you can contact me on my email, parham.ashraf@gmail.com, whenever you like. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the challenges that we faced during our development, the motivations behind using ViewComponent and Lookbook, and the background that that helped us or made us to use ViewComponents as a separate gem to be added to our library, to our application. And I will tell you why we should use ViewComponent and how we use it. So we give you some recommendations. It's actually brought from GitHub, and this is a recommendation from them. I just put them in quotation, and I've mentioned, I will talk about that as well. And the next step, we will talk about ViewComponent and Lookbook installation. And finally, I give you some explanation on some features and examples. So we almost had a similar experience as GitHub had. Usually we use partials and HTML because in our application we use ERB, and it's a templating language for Ruby on Rails. Most of you might use Slim as well, or stuff, or Haml, or etc. And we use HTML and partials. And at some point we noticed that we were copy and pasting parts of codes from one partial to another partial, or from one side of the code to the other side. And it was very frustrating if we wanted to change something and move forward. So after a bit of research, my peer developer, Andrew, his name is Andy as well, he suggested to bring in a new library. We thought about having Vue.js, React.js, but finally we decided to use something which was using purely Ruby, and it was ViewComponent. And it helps us to modularize everything and also isolate the UI from backend, and also reuse all those components in our HTML files and templates. Many companies are using ViewComponents like GitHub, GitLab, G2, and also you can see the list of them on the website, which is already mentioned here. I'm going to share the presentation with you afterwards. And why we should use ViewComponent. So the good thing about ViewComponent, it encapsulates Vue logic. You can have your business logic on a Ruby file, and also you can have HTML file as a templating language. Also, it improves your code organization. You can modularize it under namespace and classes and inheritance. And in future, you can just reuse those components that you already created before. Also, it enhances your reusability that I've already mentioned. Simplify testing, because with every component that you generate, you will have a test file being added to your project. Also, it facilitates your collaboration. For example, you can work on part of the application while your peer developer or your colleague works on a specific module or view component, and then you can match them up together by having a specific structure and then present it to the user. Also, it boosts the modularity that I've already talked about, enhance maintainability. You can do small changes to magnificent changes by just going to the component and change the component without touching any other place in your application. And also, it separates your front and back end completely. But you have to respect some rules within your development phase. For example, we're not using ViewComponents as a query system, so we don't make any query or database calls within our ViewComponents. We usually prepare the data beforehand and then we inject them into our ViewComponents. So it helps us to trace the application and make sure everything works properly. And if something breaks, we can easily go to the place that actually is broken. But how we utilize the view component, we follow the suggestion from GitHub. They usually have general purpose components and app specific components. For example, you can have buttons, modals, cards, generic tables inside your general purpose view components that we call them general components. And it's a separate namespace within our application. And whenever you want to have a new UI element, we first put it in general component, and then we reuse it in app specific components. The app specific view components are the components that you use it through your business logic development. So for example, you put your business logic inside your app specific view component and then make a mixture of other components together to present it to the user. And this helps us to just separate the two things, the UI patterns and the business logic patterns. In the next step, I'm gonna start how to install the view component. So as Andy always mentioned, please go to the GitHub repository and give it a thumbs up or a star and actually use it. It's pretty cool. So the first thing and the easiest thing is to just add the gem view component and do bundle install. And the next thing, you will have a handful number of generators for the component. So it's simple. Just write Rails generate component hello world, and it creates a component called hello world. And actually it concatenates a component name to the hello world. So it will be hello world component under the component namespace. And finally, you can render the hello world component. And whenever you write the generator, you will have three files. The first file would be hello world component.rb, which contains all your logics, which would be handled or handed to the HTML file. Hello world component.html.erb, which contains your template and your view stuff. And finally, your hello world component test, which contains all your tests. And in the next step, I'm going to talk about some generators that can be very helpful. The first thing, you can pass some arguments to your component. So as you saw previously, it's in class hello world component. It's a class, and you can change the initializer by adding few arguments, and then decide on how your view would be presented by adding some helper methods. So if you want to add a new argument, you just need to pass the arguments as the arguments whenever you generate a component. Also, you can use namespace. For example, you want to have a list, some view components which contains all say hi in different languages, for example, and then say hi components double colon hello world, and then pass the arguments, and it would put it inside the components, inside say hi components, and then inside the hello world. Yes.
Is that what you use to separate your business and your UI components?
Yep. Yep. Okay. Exactly. So in further steps, I will talk about them, how you can separate them actually. And also you might have different templating engines like Slim. So whenever you pass -- template engine, you can add different templating engines like Slim. Or you can have RSpec as a test framework, and it's good because most of the people I think now are using RSpec. I'm using it. And also you can have a preview as a part of your generator. So by adding just -- preview, it creates a preview file. Usually it goes, if you use RSpec, it goes to spec folder under components under previews, I think. And then you can add a stimulus to your project by having turbo or turbo frame inside your view component. I tried to make it work for this presentation. Stimulus didn't work because I had issues with Ruby on Rails 7 import map. There were hacky ways, but I decided to just not to deal with it for this presentation.
That's like a very new feature that just got added to the component.
And I tried to make it work. It's like add some stuff to application.rb and then try to see if it works. There was a way I can share the link that I found, but it wasn't the proper way. I think we need some time to give it.
It's okay. We're interested in knowing what view component is to begin with.
So, yeah. So view component in action. The first thing, for example, if you want to have a button as a general component, the generator that you need to call is Rails generate component and general components, and under general components you will have a button. So for example, a button can have a text, can have a disable tag, or it can have classes, stuff like that, that you can insert into your view component. And for example, you can have a helper here. So if it is disabled, just check if it is disabled and then use it in your template. As you can see, the template, you can just use simple ERB way of templating and add text, which reads this text from, and also you can check if it is disabled, so add the classes you want or add the disabled tag to your HTML element. Also, the next thing that you can use is preview. So you can have multiple previews of your component. For example, you can have a default by passing the button text and disabled false, or you can have disabled preview by passing disabled true. And once it is done, you can see the previews by adding a route to your application. I can explain that afterwards. Also, you can test your component by normal testing of any Ruby on Rails view or partial views. Like you can just write test to check if the text is right, or if it is disabled or not, or if the button even exists or not. And that's it for the view component. I mean, it's pretty simple and you can use it very easily. To show the components, view component offer previews, but there is a problem. I think as the number of the components grows, you will be confused in future. So that's why we started using Lookbook. Actually, as my friend said, you can use Storybook as well, but Andy decided to use Lookbook, and I think it's pretty cool because you will have features on Lookbook that you can see codes, HTML, and also parameters to be passed to the component on the UI. And so this is why we started using Lookbook as part of our development phase. It gives us a UI development tool that we can review or preview our view components and make sure everything works properly. So in this case, again, we needed another gem called Lookbook. This is the GitHub repository. Please go there and start it. It is a pretty cool guide. I'm not going to talk about Lookbook in details, but the documentation is really helpful. I mean, it's pretty cool and you can easily use it. The only thing is to add gem Lookbook to your gem file. Add the mount to your router, so mount Lookbook engine, add Lookbook, and usually we use it under dev environment. So we wrap the whole thing inside if rails.env is dev, and we make sure it's not going to be shown on production. It doesn't matter really, but for us it's like safety. And also if you want to have live changes, you can use listen and action cable gem. Action cable gem is always part of the Ruby on Rails, but you need to have listen as a part of the gem set that you're going to use. And in the end, you can see your Lookbook in localhost 3000/Lookbook. So you can have something like this. You can have your general components folder. Under that button component that can be shown as default or disabled. And also in the next part, you can preview the button or the button itself. You can see the HTML file, the source code of the RB file, which is the business logic, the way that you called it actually, the notes, and also you can pass parameters to your preview. For example, if you have a form and you want to test it, you can pass parameters and test different variations to see if it works properly as you want it. And yes, this is almost everything that you need to start with view component. We're going to go get deeper to view components. Another cool thing that you can use in view component is slots. So you can generate, you can pass code or part of your application, I mean your HTML as a slot to your view component. So how does it work? You can add renders one. So you tell view component to renders one header, and you can tell renders one body, or you can render many buttons within a component. For this case, I created another component called card component within the general components, and then and down the road, I'm going to use this card component to show my art gallery. In this case, you can also use other general components that you already created. So for example, if you want to make buttons, you can just click, add general components, button component, and reuse that one. And you only need to pass them as an object, which are the parameters that you need for the button, like text and disabled. So the HTML is like this. I actually pass an image URL to show the image. I pass the header as a slot. I pass the body as slot 2, and also I pass the buttons as a hash of the parameters, and hash of the parameters, and then I generate them in the card. So the component would be previewed like this. First, I need to create the component, and then pass the image URL, which is needed for initiating or initializing the class. Then it uses a builder design pattern. So with header, I pass the header text. You can pass even the HTML or another component within this header. Also, you can pass the body, and with buttons, you can pass the number of the buttons that you want. For example, button 1, button 2, disabled, disabled true, false, disabled true. And these are the parameters that you actually need to create the button. And finally, you can have this card. Actually, I use Tailwind CSS to just play with it, but actually it's pretty cool. And you can have this card. In the end, in the next phase, you can have the code HTML, so you can review if everything renders properly. And for more information, you can just visit this link, slots in view components. The next thing, is there any questions so far about these? Okay, thank you so much. And for the next thing, you can have several collections or several items within a collection to be shown to the user. Like partials, how you use the partials. For partials, you pass a collection, and the partial works in a way that it's like generates them one after the other. And this is the same thing in view components. You can have the art product components, which is my business logic layer or namespace of the components, and then art product component, which is actually a card customized for showing the art product. So with collection parameter, I say that, okay, the art product, this is a collection. So whenever I pass the collection, treat it as a collection and generates multiple of them at the same time. And you don't need to use for loop or each loop. You actually need to just simply write the HTML for one component. Here I reuse the card component. So general component, card component that I already created, I added the header and I passed the title that I wanted. So my art product is an object. I just fake the art product as a record in the database, which contains title, description, and image URL. And whenever it is passed to this component, it's going to generate the header with title, the body with the description, and the buttons that I wanted for this specific card, which is add to cart, add to wish list, and the details. And then I'm gonna create the previews for this one. So for one record, you can just simply use the previous way of rendering the view component, like render the art product component dot new, like a new class, and pass the art product you want. Or you can render multiple art products. So I have a list of art products, and then render art product, but here I have to use dot with collection and pass the art products to the component. So it renders all of them in one shot. And it's a bit messy, and then in the next step, we're gonna fix this up. So in this case, to fix it, you need to wrap the whole view component collection inside, for example, grid in Tailwind, and mention the number of the columns you want to show up there. For example, I chose 4 as a default for a number of the columns, but you can use 2, 3, 4 to use it or reuse it in other places, for example, in the sidebar or in the main page. And I hope it's not that small, but yeah, it's in so. Sorry. And then you can have, for example, default with 2 columns, with 3 columns, etc. And you only need to pass 2 or 3 to your view component as part of your parameters. And then you can have all of them in Lookbook. So 2 or 3 layers, which is wrapped into HTML. Also, the other thing that you can use, because you already may have many helpers for your application, you can reuse all those helpers inside your view components. I created a very simple page helper, called it crazy text. So it uppercases the odd indexes and lowercases the even ones. So I want to use this helper inside our component. There are 2 ways to do it. First, it's like normal class. You can include the helper inside your class and then call the helper and the functions and the helper. Or you can proxy helper by using delegate. So if you include it, then you would be able to just call the crazy text and pass a description to it. I reuse just the view component that I already created as version 3 and version 4, or version 2 and version 3. Or you can mention that use helpers and then call the crazy text. So whenever you call the crazy text, it goes to the helpers and then renders the crazy text. Also, there are some other features that I think my time wouldn't allow me to talk about them extensively, but we have conditional rendering. So you can use def render question mark and put some conditions in it to either show or not show the view component. And you can use it inside your view. Also, you have life cycles in view components, and it's only limited to before render. We don't have after render like in React. Also, you can use templates, translations, and JavaScript. JavaScript is new. We only added JavaScript inside the HTML file as a script, or we use global script at the moment, but we're gonna reuse, we're gonna add stimulus as soon as we have time to do so. And also you can have CSS like normal thing in your view files. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, that's it. So